Her pen stopped mid-sentence, trembling above the page, as if it knew the words she wrote were no longer hers. I found the notebook under our bed, its pages filled with secrets that burned my hands. My wife, Clara, had always been a writ-era weaver of worlds, a keeper of dreams. For 10 years I believed her stories were just that, stories. But when she returned from her week-long writing retreat in the mountains, something was different. Her eyes, once warm and open, darted away from mine. Her laughter, once a melody that filled our home, was now a hollow echo. I didn't want to believe it, but the truth was clawing its way out, and I couldn't ignore it any longer. Clara had always craved solitude to write. Her annual retreats were sacred, a time to find her voice, she said. I supported her, even when it meant sleeping alone in our too-quiet house, missing her soft breathing beside me. This time, she'd chosen a remote cabin in the Adirondacks, a place she described as perfectly isolated. She left with a suitcase full of notebooks and a promise to call every night. But the calls were brief, her voice distant, laced with something I couldn't name. When she came back, she was a stranger wearing my wife's face. Her smile was too tight, her stories too vague. I asked about the retreat, and she spoke of misty mornings and quiet trails, but her words felt rehearsed, like lines from one of her novels. The notebook was my first clue. I wasn't looking for it. I was searching for a lost sock when my fingers brushed its leather cover under the bed. I pulled it out, expecting poetry or plot outlines. Instead, I found letters handwritten, intimate, addressed to someone named E. They weren't stories. They were confessions. E, you make me feel alive again. One page read. I can't stop thinking of your hands, your voice, the way you see me. My stomach churned. Each word was a knife, carving away the life we'd built. I read until dawn, my heart breaking with every sentence, until I reached the last page. I don't know how to leave him, but I know I can't stay. I didn't confront her. Not yet. Anger burned in my chest, but so did doubt. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe it was fiction, a character she'd conjured. But the details, the cedar scent of a cabin, the creak of a wooden porch were too real. I needed proof. That's when I hired the private investigator. His name was Marcus, a gruff man with a voice like gravel and eyes that saw through lies. I gave him Clara's itinerary, the retreat's address, and the notebook. Find out who he is, I told him. Find out what she's hiding. Marcus worked fast. Within days he sent me photos. Clara, laughing in a cafe with a man I didn't know. Clara, her hand brushing his as they walked a forest trail. Clara, her head on his shoulder under a starlit sky. The man, I presumed, was tall, with dark hair and a quiet intensity. He looked like the kind of person she'd write about. Brooding, poetic, dangerous. Each image was a punch to the gut, but I couldn't stop looking. Marcus's report confirmed the retreat wasn't just for writing. Clara had spent her days with this man, a fellow writer named Ethan, in a cabin they shared under the guise of collaboration. I should have been furious, but all I felt was grief. Clara wasn't just my wife. She was my best friend, my confidant, my home. We'd met in college, bonded over late-night talks about books and dreams. I proposed to her on a rainy rooftop, promising to love her through every story she'd ever write. How had we gotten here? I replayed our marriage, searching for cracks. Was I too distant? Too predictable? Had I failed to see her fading? The questions haunted me, but they didn't change the truth. Clara had chosen someone else. I planned the confrontation carefully. She was leaving for another retreat, another lie, I now knew. I waited until she was packing, her suitcase open on our bed. Clara, I said, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. Who's Ethan? Her hands froze, her face paling. She stammered, denying everything, but I held up the notebook. You wrote it all down, I said. Every word. Her eyes filled with tears, but they weren't for me. They were for herself, for the life she'd built on lies now crumbling. She confessed in fragments. Ethan was a writer she'd met at a workshop years ago. They reconnected at the retreat, and it just happened. She swore it wasn't planned, that she still loved me, that she was confused. But her words felt empty, like a draft she hadn't revised. I hired a PI, I told her. I have photos, Clara. I know everything. That's when she broke. She sank to the floor, sobbing, begging me to understand. But I couldn't. Not yet. The weeks that followed were a blur. Clara moved out, staying with a friend while we figured things out. I didn't want revenge, but I needed her to feel the weight of her choices. Marcus kept tabs on her, not because I wanted to control her, but because I needed to know if she'd choose Ethan or me. The reports were brutal. Clara was unraveling missing deadlines, canceling readings, withdrawing from the world she'd once loved. Ethan, it turned out, wasn't her savior. He was a drifter, a man who chased muses and left broken hearts behind. When Clara realized he wasn't staying, she fell apart completely. I saw her one last time at a coffee shop months later. She looked tired, her spark dimmed. She asked to talk, and I agreed, not out of hope but curiosity. I made a mistake, she said, her voice raw. I thought Ethan was my story, but he was just a chapter. You were my home. Her words stirred something in me, but not enough to rebuild what was gone. I'd spent months watching her fall apart, but I'd been falling apart too. The difference was I'd started to heal. I didn't take her back. Not because I couldn't forgive her, but because I needed to forgive myself first. I'd ignored the signs, convinced myself her distance was just her art. I'd failed us as much as she had. But in the wreckage I found something new: strength. I started writing not to escape like Clara, but to understand. My words were clumsy at first, but they were mine. They were honest. Clara's still out there, chasing stories, chasing herself. I hope she finds what she's looking for. As for me, I'm rebuilding one word at a time. The notebook sits on my shelf, not as a wound but as a reminder. Love is fragile, but so is betrayal. And sometimes the hardest stories to write are the ones that set you free.